So it's been 24 hours. I didn't melt it, so look, progress already. What's going on, guys? It's Zach. In my last video I sort of mentioned that I've been working on this Dungeons and Dragons world. This is my Dungeons and Dragons thing that I'm working on. And I've been watching so many crafting videos on YouTube of people making dioramas and scratch builds and things like that. And I was like, how sweet would it be to make something like that? And then I saw an ad for one of these 3D printed cities, and I had a brain blast like Jimmy Neutron. What if I made a 3D map of the city? So it would apply all the things I've learned from watching these diorama videos, but then it would also be functional towards the Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I'm working on. I was like, that's sweet. I don't know if this is gonna work out. I don't know if it's gonna look good. I've never done anything like this before. There's gonna be lots of mistakes. I'm gonna be very aggravated, I imagine, but hopefully it's cool. So let's get to store. Oh wait, hold on, those were groceries. And so after essentially 2 days of shopping for stuff, I finally accumulated all of the things that I need to begin, and we're just gonna figure it out. I did make one building last night so that when I started filming today I didn't look like a complete idiot, but I melted it with the primer, so I guess I'm still gonna be a complete idiot. So like any good project, you gotta start with a plan. First thing I did was sketch out the town that I'm going to make. I decided I'm gonna name it Elderacre. It's gonna be deep in the Delphi forest right here. Then I loosely sketched that onto this sheet of XPS foam. And so right out of the gate, this is where we ran into our first problem. The knife that I intended to use to cut the foam was not long enough to cut through all the way. So then I tried to use every kitchen knife at my disposal. None of them were strong enough, which meant I had to go back to the store and buy the right knife. So with the right tool in hand, I began cutting through the foam. The problem was I'd already done a lot of damage with the kitchen knife, and so in order to save the edges, I had to cut about an inch into my drawn map, which wasn't the end of the world. It just meant I had to scrap the plan and act on my feet, do a little improvisation. But maintaining the spirit of the original plan, it was time to focus on elevation. These little foam pieces are going to be the hill that a haunted church or mansion or something sits atop of that haunts our little village down below. I hot glue those puppies down, and then it's time to move on to the Sculpt-A-Mold. You can buy this stuff at most art stores. It's basically plaster and paper mache mixed together. Lets you add some nice textures. That's how we're going to turn these rectangles into hills. I was a little bit of a baby this first time around. I was wearing gloves. I didn't want to get it on my fingers, but by the second time around, I'm just getting my hands deep up in there. Naturally, just as the plaster began to harden, I realized that the hills were way too steep for anybody to be able to walk up them based on my scale. So I had to fabricate a kind of ramp, and this second batch of Sculpt-A-Mold causes all kinds of problems down the road. While that dries, I began work on the trees, which are just these little brown armatures covered in hobby tack, sprinkled with Woodland Scenics coarse turf, and then dusted with watered down Mod Podge. This one was like a perfect topiary tree, but none of the other ones end up looking like this. I then just repeated those steps over and over again until I got the right number of trees that I thought I needed for this map, which again, I'm sort of just winging. With about 24 trees done, I began work on what would become the Haunted Mansion. With this project, I keep finding myself needing to be reminded that it's not bad to be a beginner. You know, there's a part of me that like really wants to be the best at this, because I've only ever watched people that are the best at it do it, and I'm not that good at it because I've never done it before. It's very frustrating, but it's a, you know, it's a learning process, right? You're not going to be the best at it right away. Prime this off camera because I was too frustrated to film it. Trying to be extra kind to myself, I began to paint the Haunted Mansion. I'm using Reaper mini paints here because that's just what I had, but I don't know if that's the best. Gave it a little bit of a dry brush to make those bricks pop, but then it was right back into problem solving mode. The Sculpt-A-Mold hasn't, it's kind of like still wet in some places, and I don't know what that's all about. I just decided that the best way to get it to dry was to put it in the sun for a couple of hours, and that seems to have done the trick. Next thing to do was seal it up with some Mod Podge, give it a nice little protective coating as I went to mix up the paint. I used dollar store paint here, and that was a mistake. It just never ends up drying, but it was only $1. Then using this cheap darkened brown, I just blasted the whole thing, leaving some of the rocks white so that I could do a cool wash trick that I learned. And since I don't have a nice studio like most of the YouTube crafters, I had to clean up a little bit just because my living room kitchen area was a disaster. Remember how just a little bit ago I said I had this cool wash trick that I learned? It's not as much that I learned it as it is that I saw somebody do it one time in a YouTube video, and now from memory I'm trying to recreate it. It's just brown wash, yellow wash, and gray wash, but it ends up turning out pretty good, like way better than I deserved for it to turn out. I was too impatient to let it dry on its own, so I got out a hairdryer. Then came what would be the most tedious task of this whole project, constructing the houses. Using dollar store foam for the walls and styrofoam plates for the roof, I began crafting 6 unique houses, and using this little pin I etched in shingles on the roof and I etched in planks on the walls. This wire brush wood grain technique, much like many other things in this video, was stolen from Black Magic Craft, and I used little balsa wood sticks to make all of the front doors of the houses. Here we can see all of the buildings laid out on the boards so we can get a sense of where everything will be, and up here on the hill is where the haunted mansion is. I think this is going to be a really memorable landmark for the village of Elderacre. So my goal for today is to paint all of the houses, get them all primed up, get them all painted, and then glue them down so that I can start doing the dirt and the grass. I'm ready for this terrain to start looking like the way it's supposed to. Using Black Magic Craft's patented recipe of black paint and Mod Podge, I prime and protect all of the houses. After some deep contemplation and some Welch's fruit snacks, I decided that I was going to use a pretty basic brown for the walls and then do some fun colors for the roofing. Then I just used a darker brown for the front doors, a little bit of red for the chimneys, and it was time to get to washing. I ended up using a pretty dark black wash here because I wanted to bring out all the fine details in the roof and the walls and also sort of mute the brighter browns and colored parts of the house. Then I just gave it a once over with a bright dry brushing. Bright. And here's just a quick look at the final product of all of these houses. Now that they were all painted, it was time to glue them down. In hindsight, I think I should have maybe not glued them down right away, but I did, so this is what that looked like. With the sick new pin vise that I got, I started drilling little holes for all of the trees and then just dry fitting them into their places. Once all the holes were drilled, I began painting little Mod Podge patches where the dirt underneath the trees would go. And I got this dirt from sifting potting soil through a stocking, which, you know, it did the job. But then this next step is where the wheels really started to come off. The spritzer that I was using to spray on watered down Mod Podge was way too strong for the light dirt, and it just ended up blowing it all over the place. It turns out the dirt is just warming us up. It's really this fine turf grass that sends me to bed weeping, because just like the dirt, it's too light for the spritzing, and it ends up blowing it all over the place. So after a little bit of a fiasco with the grass, I knew it was going to be difficult, but I didn't realize it was going to not work at all the way that I wanted it to. I have to go get an eyedropper or two, and then I think we should be golden. But since it was late, I would have to wait until the morning to go get an eyedropper, so I decided to press on with the grout paths. And now I'm not being a baby with this stuff, it's actually really bad for your hands. It says so on the bag, and also I looked it up because I didn't believe the bag. Alright fellas, we got them. We got the eyedroppers, so hopefully the gluing process is quick and easy now. And then as optimistic as ever, I began gluing grass back down, and oh, look at that. No blowback. It's a beautiful thing. Then ever so delicately, I began to replace some of the patches where I had missed grout. And before moving to the hill, I wanted to glue down all the trees and make sure that the valley side was all completed. And I'm not going to show you quite yet, but the village is starting to look real nice. But a village without a spirit that haunts it is boring as heck, and we don't want no heckin' boring villages. So we gotta get to doing the landscaping for the haunted mansion up here on the hill. Also, while that dries, I ruined the well when I was doing the grout work down below, so I need to repaint that. I thought the one tone of green was starting to look a little boring, so I got some of this dead grass and sprinkled in some weeds around just to give it some color depth. And then it was finally time to glue down the rest of the trees. Look at that, wow. I added a few bushes and shrubs around just to add a little bit of height variation, and then I painted all the edges of the diorama black. And with that final touch, I think it's as good as done. So here come the glamour shots. Strap in, fellas. so this is the final result of my 3D village diorama, I guess. For this being my first attempt at anything like this, I'm pretty pleased with the result. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe because I'm going to be doing a lot more crafty stuff like this, a lot more Dungeons and Dragons stuff, because it's a lot of fun to make these kinds of videos, and I think the better I get at it, the more fun it'll be to make and to shoot. So subscribe if you like this kind of thing. Some things I've learned from making this that I will apply to things like this going forward. One, I think I need to get a lighter grass to mix with this green because it's just all one color of green. So I think having like a lighter green mixed in with it would help give it some depth. Another thing I think I'll do is get a darker grout. This grout is very light. It almost looks like sand. It's supposed to be dirt. This scale was a little bit of a pain in the ass to work with, so I think maybe I'll do a bigger scale. You know, for my first at-bat, I'm pretty pleased with it, you know? It's not embarrassing. There were some moments where I truly did not think I could do it, but we got here, so thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let's do this again sometime soon.